96 hours ago, a container ship left the port of Savannah, Georgia. The MSC Adriatic, a 400-meter Panamax-class container vessel operated by Mediterranean Shipping Company under a charter agreement with the United States Military Sealift Command, departed with a manifest that listed its cargo as industrial equipment and vehicle components, bound for the port of Ashdod, Israel, via the Suez Canal. The manifest was a cover document, standard practice for military cargo moving through commercial shipping channels. The actual cargo, loaded across 847 containers in holds 2, 3, and 4, was a resupply package authorized under the Emergency Defense Assistance Protocol, activated on March 1, 2026. 14 M1A2 SEPV-3 Abrams main battle tanks, 38 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, 240 Paladin self-propelled howitzers, 12,155 mm precision-guided artillery rounds, 4,200 Javelin anti-tank missile systems, 180 Stinger man-portable air defense systems, and 847 containers of associated ammunition, spare parts, and maintenance equipment. Total assessed value, $4.7 billion. The MSC Adriatic entered the Red Sea through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at 2:17 a.m. on March 28. At 3:44 a.m., 80 nautical miles southwest of the port of Aden, 6 Houthi fast attack craft approached from the northeast at 42 knots. The ship's unarmed crew of 24, Filipino, Ukrainian, and Greek nationals, had no defensive capability and no realistic option. At 4:02 a.m., the MSC Adriatic stopped engines and complied with Houthi boarding instructions. By noon, the ship was anchored in the outer roads of Hodeidah Harbor, still carrying all 8 FA-47 containers, under Houthi control, with its crew held as hostages. The United States just lost $4.7 billion in military equipment that was supposed to rearm Israel, and the people who took it are now deciding what to do with 14 Abrams tanks, 4,200 Javelin systems, and 180 Stinger missiles. To understand why this is not just a maritime hijacking story, to understand why this single operation may do more damage to Israel's military capacity than 4 weeks of Iranian missile strikes, you need to understand what was in those 847 containers and why it cannot be replaced quickly. The M1A2 SEPV-3 Abrams tank is the current production variant of America's primary main battle tank. It incorporates the Trophy Active Protection System, the same Israeli-developed system that has proven effective at defeating anti-tank missiles in combat. Israel operates Merkava tanks domestically, but the SEPV-3 Abrams with trophy integration was specifically requested to supplement Israeli armor losses sustained in the ground operations of the past month. Israel has lost an estimated 47 Merkava tanks to Iranian-supplied anti-tank guided missiles in 4 weeks of fighting. 14 Abrams tanks does not replace 47 Merkava losses, but it was the beginning of the resupply, and now it is in Hodeidah. The 4,200 Javelin anti-tank missile systems are more immediately critical. The Javelin is a fire-and-forget infrared-guided missile with a top attack capability that defeats tanks by hitting the thinner armor on the top of the turret. Israel has been using Javelins at a rate of approximately 200 to 300 per week in ground operations. Current assessed Israeli Javelin inventory before this shipment, approximately 1,400 rounds. At current consumption rates, that is 5 to 7 weeks of supply. The 4,200 Javelins on the MSC Adriatic represented 14 to 21 additional weeks of supply. That resupply is now in Houthi hands. The 180 Stinger man-portable air defense systems are in a separate category of concern entirely. The Stinger is an infrared homing surface-to-air missile designed to be fired from the shoulder by a single operator. It is effective against helicopters and low-flying fixed-wing aircraft at altitudes up to 3,800 meters. Its infrared seeker cannot distinguish between an Israeli Air Force helicopter and a United Nations medical evacuation helicopter. It cannot distinguish between an American military aircraft and a civilian airliner operating at low altitude on approach to a regional airport. 180 Stingers in the hands of a non-state actor operating across Yemen, with supply lines to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and to Popular Mobilization Forces in Syria, is not a military problem. It is an aviation security problem that affects every commercial flight operating in the airspace of 6 countries. If you understand why 180 Stingers in Hodeidah is a problem for airlines in Dubai and Amman and Riyadh, and not just for the Israeli Air Force, subscribe right now. Because what I am about to explain is the full cascading consequence of what happened at 4:02 a.m. in the southern Red Sea. Let me give you the numbers on what this means for the resupply pipeline. The United States has been supplying Israel with military equipment under emergency authority since March 1st. The pipeline has three components: airlift for small, high-priority items like ammunition and precision guidance kits, sea lift for heavy equipment like tanks and artillery, and pre-positioned equipment drawdown from American stocks in Europe and the Middle East. The sea lift component, the component the MSC Adriatic represented, is the only way to move tanks, artillery, and heavy vehicles in the quantities Israel needs. A C-17 transport aircraft can carry 1 Abrams tank. The MSC Adriatic was carrying 14. To airlift the equivalent of what was on the MSC Adriatic would require 14 C-17 sorties for the tanks alone, and hundreds more for the artillery, ammunition, and vehicles. The United States does not have hundreds of C-17 sorties available on short notice while simultaneously supporting operations in the Middle East, maintaining the Pacific deterrence posture, and managing the logistics of 30,000 personnel across the Gulf region. Sea lift is not a preference, it is a requirement, and the Red Sea sea lift route just became operationally unviable. The alternative routing, around the Cape of Good Hope, avoiding the Red Sea entirely, adds approximately 6,400 kilometers and 17 to 20 additional days to the transit time. Equipment that should have arrived in Ashdod within 7 days will now take 25 to 27 days via the Cape route, assuming the next ship is loaded and departed immediately. 25 to 27 days, during which Israel's Javelin inventory depletes at 200 to 300 rounds per week, during which tank losses continue without replacement, during which the 155mm precision artillery rounds that Israel needs for counter-battery fire against Iranian-supplied rocket systems are sailing around Africa. The resupply timeline just tripled. The consumption rate did not change. Now let me tell you what the law says about what happened at 4:02 a.m. and why the law is not going to help recover those containers. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the seizure of a vessel in international waters by a non-state actor constitutes piracy. The International Maritime Organization has clear protocols for responding to piracy incidents. Those protocols involve flag state authority. The flag state of the MSC Adriatic is Panama, and coastal state cooperation. The nearest cooperative coastal state is Djibouti. Here is the problem. The Houthis are not a recognized state. They control the port of Hodeidah, but they are not the recognized government of Yemen. The internationally recognized government of Yemen is the Presidential Leadership Council based in Aden. The Houthis are a non-state actor operating in territory they control militarily but do not govern legally. UNCLOS piracy provisions apply between states. There is no legal mechanism under UNCLOS that compels a non-state actor to release a seized vessel. You cannot serve a writ on a Houthi commander. You cannot enforce a court order in Hodeidah. The legal framework for maritime security assumes the actors are states or state-sponsored entities subject to state jurisdiction. The Houthis are neither. The only mechanism that can recover the MSC Adriatic and its cargo is military force, and military force in Hodeidah Harbor has complications that make it one of the most operationally complex scenarios American military planners have faced in decades. Hodeidah is the primary port through which approximately 70% of Yemen's food and humanitarian supplies enter the country. A military operation to recover the MSC Adriatic risks destroying port infrastructure that 16 million Yemenis depend on for survival. The United Nations has 14 humanitarian organizations operating through Hodeidah. International law on the protection of civilian infrastructure applies even in combat. You cannot sink the harbor to recover the tanks. You cannot bomb the containers without knowing which of the 847 contains stingers and which contains spare parts. And a stinger container hit by a bomb does not safely destroy the missiles. It distributes them. And the crew. 24 Filipino, Ukrainian, and Greek nationals are aboard. Any military operation to recover the vessel must account for their safety in ways that constrain every tactical option available. Here are the 3 options the United States is considering. None of them are good. Option 1, Special Operations Raid. Deploy Navy SEALs or Delta Force to board the MSC Adriatic in Hodeidah Harbor, neutralize the Houthi guards, secure the crew, and either recover the vessel or destroy the most sensitive cargo in place. The problem: Hodeidah Harbor is 800 meters from Houthi coastal defense positions. A special operations insertion into an anchored vessel in a hostile harbor in darkness against an alert adversary that has been expecting a recovery attempt, with 24 civilian hostages aboard, in a port that cannot be isolated without cutting off humanitarian supplies to 16 million people, is not a clean commando operation. It is one of the highest-risk hostage rescue and sensitive equipment recovery scenarios in modern military history. The planning timeline for an operation of this complexity is 72 to 96 hours minimum. During that time, the Houthis are offloading the containers. Which brings us to the critical number. The Houthis have been offloading cargo from the MSC Adriatic since 8:00 a.m. At Hodeidah's crane capacity, they can move approximately 80 to 100 containers per day. The most sensitive cargo, the Javelins and the Stingers, will be prioritized for removal and dispersal within 48 hours. By the time a special operations raid could be mounted, the missiles will not be on the ship anymore. Option 2, naval blockade of Hodeidah. Position American warships to prevent the Houthis from offloading the cargo. Use the blockade as leverage for negotiated release of the vessel and crew. The problem? A naval blockade of Hodeidah blocks the humanitarian supply chain for 16 million people simultaneously. The UN Security Council resolution that authorized previous naval operations in Yemeni waters specifically excludes humanitarian port access from interdiction. A blockade that stops humanitarian supplies would require new Security Council authorization, which Russia and China would veto, or a unilateral American decision to impose a blockade that violates existing UN resolutions, in the middle of a conflict where American unilateralism is already the primary diplomatic liability. Option 3, negotiate for the crew's release, accept the loss of the equipment, and reroute future shipments via the Cape of Good Hope. The problem? Accepting the loss of $4.7 billion in military equipment without a meaningful response establishes the precedent that Houthi seizure of American military cargo is a viable and consequence-free operation. Every future resupply ship becomes a target. The Cape routing adds 17 to 20 days and does not solve the fundamental problem. As long as the Houthis have anti-ship missile capability in the Red Sea, surface vessels carrying American military cargo are at risk regardless of their route. They can be attacked approaching the Bab el-Mandeb from the south as easily as from the north. There is no routing option that eliminates the threat. There is only routing that makes attacks marginally less convenient. Here is what you need to understand as we close. The Houthis spent approximately $800,000 on the operation: 6 fast attack craft, fuel, crew wages, and the operational coordination to intercept a vessel whose route and schedule they apparently knew in advance, suggesting an intelligence penetration of either the military Sealift Command scheduling system, the Port of Savannah cargo manifests, or the commercial shipping coordination network that all three parties, MSC, the U.S. military, and the Israeli Defense Procurement Office, used to arrange the shipment. $800,000 for $4.7 billion in American military equipment, for 14 tanks that Israel needed yesterday, for 4,200 Javelin systems that will now either be used against Israeli armor, transferred to Hezbollah, or sold to the highest bidder in a market where anti-tank guided missiles are currently in very high demand, for 180 Stinger missiles that can shoot down any aircraft flying below 12,000 feet within 5 kilometers of whoever is holding the launcher. Those launchers are now being distributed to people whose targeting criteria do not distinguish between military and civilian aircraft. Cost exchange ratio, 1 to 5,075, in the Houthis' favor, and the crew is still aboard, still hostages, still the constraint that makes every military option more complicated than it would otherwise be. Share this video, because the coverage will show you the ship's position on a maritime tracking map and State Department statements about consequences and Pentagon assurances that the cargo is being secured. It will not tell you that 80 to 100 containers are being offloaded per day and the Javelins will be gone before any rescue operation can be mounted. It will not explain why UNCLOS piracy provisions do not apply to non-state actors. It will not do the math on what tripling the resupply timeline means for Israeli Javelin inventory at current consumption rates. They will give you the version where diplomacy produces a resolution and the crew comes home. I just gave you the version where the containers are already being offloaded, the stingers will be distributed within 48 hours, and an $800,000 operation just removed $4.7 billion from Israel's rearmament pipeline while creating an aviation security threat that will take years to fully contain. 6 fast attack craft. 4:02 a.m., 24 hostages, 847 containers, $4.7 billion gone. And somewhere in Hodeida right now, someone is opening a container marked vehicle components and finding 4,200 reasons to celebrate.